founder and CEO of AnyLog. AnyLog is about managing the IoT data and monetizing the IoT data. And I'll show you how that works and what we do. So we really take two technologies and bring them together. The first one is a decentralized network, a network that anyone could participate, and the blockchain. And with those two technologies together, we're building a platform that could serve the IoT data. That's the data which is generated from billions of devices. We could serve the data in real time and in a very, very scalable way. So what are the challenges in IoT? What are the problems that needs to be solved? The main problem is the huge amount of data. We all know that we are getting close to 50 billion devices. Just for comparison, there are 7 billion people and almost 50 billion devices that generates data. So that's a staggering amount of data. If we look at the growth of data, we will see that it duplicates itself every 2 years. And this problem is everywhere. In assembly lines, in smart cities, in automotive, in oil and gas, all these places are seeing huge amounts of data. And the question is, how can we extract value from the data in a very efficient and cost-effective way? So if we think about the challenges that are in the space, what do we need to do? The number one thing that needs to be done is be able to manage those huge amount of data. That's a very, very complicated challenge. I come from the database space. I used to be a founder of a database company. And I'm sure that many of you know that it's one thing to manage a small amount of data, but if the data grows, if there is a huge amount of data, that creates very, very big challenges on performance and scaling and the cost of the system. So the number one problem is the huge amount of data. But IoT has other problems. So for example, we don't want to go and do a specific process with every specific device which is out there. There are billions of devices that generate data. We can't go to every camera or every type of camera or every type of device and build a process. It simply doesn't scale, and it makes things very, very expensive. So we need a way to manage all those types of data in a unified way. We need also security, very important issue. We need to be able to manage the security of all the data which is generated from the devices, and we want to do all of those things in a very, very cost-effective way. So that is the platform that we provide. This is what AnyLog is about, and I'll show you a little bit more about what we do. But before I talk about our platform, there is something which is very, very interesting which I want to show you. And that is that there is no unified way to deal with the IoT data. So to explain this point, I went to Google and I ran a search. And the search, it was simple. I just wanted to know how many cars entered Palo Alto in the last 2 hours. And what I got back is over 700,000 web pages. There are two problems here. The first problem is that Google doesn't understand the query. It doesn't understand what I want. I'm expecting to see some number reflected back, and what I get back is the list of websites. The second problem is that Google doesn't have the data, which is even a more complicated problem, because if you think about it, you would see that Google is looking at information, at data, which exists in websites that people create. Whereas we are interested, this type of question is interested with data which is generated from devices that monitor the cars on the street, devices that monitor people on the street, devices that monitor machines. And Google is not able to do it. It doesn't have the data. So with the platform that AnyLog is building, we would be able to do the two things. AnyLog is able to understand the type of queries that people and companies want to issue against the IoT data. And the second thing that we would deliver, we would be maintaining, AnyLog would be maintaining the IoT data. So we could reflect a result which represents what really is happening, and these results are coming from all those devices that generate data. So how do we do it? Well, we create a platform which is based on a distributed network, a network that anybody could contribute resources to the network. But for the data owners, what this network does, for the data owners, it gives them an out-of-the-box platform to manage data. So if you think about it, all those years, for many years, the database companies, the Oracle, the Amazon, taught us that in order to manage data, you've got to bring data into the databases, that they have to control the data, that they have to decide what would be done with the data and what are the tools that we were to use in order to manage the data. But it doesn't have to be this way. What we're offering is a network which is very similar to the Bitcoin and Ethereum, in the sense that if you think about Bitcoin, you could transfer money from one person to another without anyone in the middle and without anybody controlling it and without any fees. In the same way, the network that we're building allows you to manage data without any fees for the Oracles and the Amazons and the IBMs. It's a network that manages data at no cost. You send devices, send the data to the network, and you could immediately run queries against it. And it scales. It scales forever. The only cost that you would be paying is the actual cost for electricity and storage that support the data. But all those projects that needs to be done and all the costs that the big companies are taking for managing data, all of those are gone. So let's see what happens today in the IoT space. To bring data from devices to a place where the data can be efficiently managed, it's a very complicated process that takes a lot of resources. Companies started to manage the IoT data in the cloud, but they very quickly realized that the cost of bringing the data to the cloud is higher than the value that they can extract from the data. And also, they noticed the cloud is not a good place for managing data. It's not a real-time environment. So they said, okay, let's try and manage the data at the edge of the network. And then just some of the data would go to the cloud. So they ended up with this complicated multi-layer architecture where some data is managed at the edge of the network near the devices and some at the cloud. And every spot here in this diagram needs a database and needs a lot of work, needs people to work, needs a project, and a lot of costs. We are managing the data in a completely different way. We offer a platform where devices send the data to the network, and then immediately data owners could extract value from the data, run queries against the data, and there are no costs and no projects that are associated with it. So this is the value that we bring, and I think that this could change or will change the way companies interact with data. This is a way to manage data without those big projects and without the cost of building, creating, and scaling databases. So just to summarize the story, we automate and unify the processing of the IoT data. There is something which is very interesting in the architecture and the product that we're building. It's not bounded by the performance of the blockchain. The blockchain is a key component here, but it only keeps the contracts. The data, when you interact with the data, it's with the network. And so there are no performance and scaling issues. It could be very fast in real time. You could manage huge amounts of data. It's all peer-to-peer based, so it scales forever. And the last thing, which is very important, it's very secure. If you give the data to the network, you own the data. You control the data, you control the access to the data, you decide who is able to see the data and interact with the data. The last thing that I want to tell you is about the team that are involved in this project. It's an amazing team. I think, it's my opinion, but check it out. I think it's some of the world's best researchers and industry experts in databases and blockchain technologies are involved in this project. That's the story. I'm staying here. If anybody of you is interested with more questions, either on the technical side, on the business side, I'll be happy to do it. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Moshe. It looks like a lot of data, yes?
A lot of data.
How are you monetizing it actually? I'm kind of confused there.
All right, so monetization. So we are building a non-for-profit organization, Kurt. You're not going to believe it. We're not going to be an Oracle. What we are doing is putting a platform which is very much like the Bitcoin or the Ethereum platform for people to use. The way we're going to fund the project is by issuing a token where if you do a transaction on the network, if you pay for electricity or you pay for storage for processing your data, not the project, just the processing of the data, then you would pay, you would use our token, and the price would be determined in a bidding process. So if I have data, if I'm a device, this is actually very interesting. If I'm a device, and let's say I've got a megabyte of data, I'll offer it to the network in a bidding process. I'd say, here's a megabyte of data. Who wants to service this data? What is your price? And then the device could take the best offer that it gets.
Where is that compute power coming from?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And very interesting question, because when you bring the data to the cloud, to a centralized location, you're bounded. There is a fixed number of machines that could support your data.
Can this be done on EOS?
If we build it on EOS, so we are building it on Ethereum. The product is on Ethereum. But on your question on where the compute power is coming, companies would want to contribute resources here, because the interesting thing is, if you think about a data warehouse today, for example, he has a problem. If you've got data, you'll go to Amazon, because Amazon invests billions in the infrastructure, and you need his infrastructure. But here, the data warehouse can monetize his storage and CPU without any investment in software infrastructure, so he'll be very interested, very motivated to use this platform. So we bring together strong interest from data owners that want to use it because they don't need to manage databases and pay for the Oracles and Amazons, and strong incentive for whoever has compute power to participate in this network. Thank you, Kurt.
This is pretty interesting, where anytime you have a humongous amount of data, even if you can't figure out a monetization strategy up front, just by having the data, you could come up with something just by A/B testing or just by trial and error. At some point, you'll hit the right strategy and scale from there. All right. Thanks, Moshe. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Let me see if they're ready for your slides.